Welcome to the Center Mid Philosopher. This episode is brought to you by Augustus Royale Fashion. Life's not black and white, it's gray, and gray is beautiful. Check out the brand below in the link. All right, folks, welcome to this week's episode of the Center Mid Philosopher. The title of this episode is Barbarians and Sheiks at the Pitch. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of private equity and sovereign wealth funds that are gobbling up soccer clubs around the world at breakneck pace. And we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive on what exactly private equity firms are, why are they interested in soccer, why are they gobbling up so many soccer clubs now, what could be some good and potential outcomes of this, and also what it could mean for fans and the players on the pitch. Before I dive in, I'd just like to quote a prophetic man by the name of Method Man, and saying, "Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar, dollar bill, y'all." And so right off the bat, I know most of you know, but what is private equity? Well, most people can anyone can invest in public companies like Coca-Cola, GE, whatever. However, not anyone can invest in private equity. Private equity you have to be an accredited investor. Another way of looking at accredited investor is really, really rich. So if you ever heard the phrase, it takes money to make money, this is it. So these are investment vehicles for high net worth individuals or institutional investors that want to buy private companies. And then I'd say, why does one want to invest in private equity firms? Well, for starters, in the last 20 years, they have outpaced the S&P 500 by almost 16%. So they've averaged, I should say that's about 10%. They've averaged about 14.65% returns, whereas the S&P has only averaged 5.91, which is just about inflation. So why would you want to invest in private equity firms? Well, you could stand to make a lot of money. But I'll come back to this because this is critically important. The fact that they're so aggressive in getting their returns, that's going to be key in this episode, and we'll revisit that theme throughout. So what do private equity firms do? They buy companies, and ones that have a lot of opportunity for improvements. Sometimes they have wildly dysfunctional cost structures, and it's kind of a turnaround situation. They look at rationalizing operations and squeezing out inefficiencies and improving profitability. I'll say that one more time because it's important to remember. They squeeze out inefficiencies and improve profitability. We will revisit that as well. And let's just talk about, I'm not sure the viewers and listeners, and frankly myself, was aware of just how ubiquitous this has become. It's frankly kind of unbelievable. So just some of the private equity acquisitions in the last handful of years. So Redbird Capital acquired AC Milan. They also have a stake in Liverpool and Toulouse. We'll come back to that. CVC Capital, 10% stake in La Liga. Area Management, 34% stake in Atletico Madrid. Silver Lake acquired a stake in City Football Group. City Football Group, of course, owns Man City, Melbourne City FC, Girona FC, Troyes FC. KKR, we'll talk about them a lot. They have an acquisition in Hertha BSC. 777 Partners out of Miami purchased Genoa. Oak Tree Capital Management, 366 million stake in Inter Milan. They also own Kane in League Two and Swansea in the Championship. Clear Lake Capital, 2.5 billion acquisition of Chelsea. Apollo Management Group acquired Crystal Palace. Fortress Investment Group acquired Aston Villa. Bordeaux was acquired by General American Partners and King Street Capital. And then So why is private equity firms so interested in soccer right now? Well, one example I just talked about, Crystal Palace. Josh Harris and David Blitzer acquired a stake for $87 million in Crystal Palace, and today that stake is worth $700 million.
You know what's crazy too, Matt? Josh Ferris is in the group that is about to purchase I almost called them the Washington Commanders. So there's obviously
Right.
there's some business in sports, we could say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that more as well. It's the NBA has become a little bit more open to it, albeit at a 20% max stake. And we'll talk about why they're so reluctant to do so. But yeah, it's all over the world in all sorts of sports. But soccer is particularly getting ravaged by corporate raiders, as they say. Another interesting thing is, why is private equity firms so interested in soccer? They're not intermediated by investment banks. That's key. So deal flow and access to direct owners is much, much better. That's great, but it's also a bit of a warning. These private equity firms aren't kidding around, and their opportunity to deal directly with owners could be a bit dangerous for some of these owners. They might not know what they're signing up for. Soccer is viewed by many to be recession-proof, not elastic to fluctuations in the economy. Essentially saying that regardless of what's going on in the world, wars, pandemics, people need sport in their lives. TV deals and streaming has disrupted the existing broadcasting formula and formats, there's a just unbelievable amount of money being made in streaming services. Ticket sales, jersey sales, sponsorship deals, voracious 4 and 5 generational fan bases, also, for example, taking teams from lower divisions like the championship to EPL is estimated to be worth $210 million alone.
Yeah, the most famous example of that people would probably recognize and put together is the purchase of Wrexham.
Yes.
Right, by Rob McEnroe.
McElhaney.
Thank
Ryan
you.
Reynolds.
Yep. And they have a clear vision of what they want to do, so that might be something that people can kind of put A to A with.
Another interesting thing is that private equity right now, they're actually they're struggling to find deals actually in the traditional segments of technology, real estate, industrial stuff, and sports, and particularly soccer has actually been an attractive asset class. There's estimated to be $1.7 trillion of dry powder sitting on the sidelines, and soccer is becoming a lot more profitable. Believe it or not, the English Premier League just had its for the first time ever 2 years in a row of consecutive profitability. Interestingly, so a lot of these capital injections and private equity firms are turning leagues and clubs profitable. So that's some of the good news. I would also say in 2012, Man United was the only club to be valued at $2 billion. Now there are 57 clubs throughout the world that have that same valuation. So that's in a 11-year period. That's what's happened there. So why are private equity firm gobbling up clubs? It's frankly, believe it or not, these are astronomical sums, but it's a relatively low cost of entry. So contextualize, okay, David Tepper just bought Charlotte FC for $350 million. The gentleman, I can't remember his name, that just bought the San Diego club for $500 million. Juxtapose that against Redbird Capital that bought AC Milan for $1.2 billion. That is to say that AC Milan is twice as valuable as a San Diego MLS club is a wild understatement. So Redbird Capital acquiring AC Milan, that's the deal of a century right there, as a matter of fact. The other thing is, we're going to talk about this frequently, is COVID. As we all know, COVID, there were a lot of trends in the world, in anything, in any business, and COVID accelerated things decades in advance in a 2 or 3 year period. so many clubs were going bankrupt, frankly, and COVID. So they needed cash. A lot of clubs needed cash, and they need it fine. Ernst and Young did an analysis that showed that over half of the European clubs were insolvent and would go bankrupt without capital injection. So they really had no choice but to turn to the Barbarians at the Gate and corporate raiders.
Yeah, you can almost see, like before COVID happened, you could see it slowly starting to trickle, and that snowball slowly starting to roll. And then when COVID, when COVID came around, it just put everything into hyperdrive.
It just avalanched.
Yeah.
We're literally this is happening as we speak. Like there's headlines every day about something, and it's an avalanche. And so we're bringing that to the listeners and viewers, and we're going to talk about what that could potentially mean in the future. Interestingly enough, too, Deloitte estimated that the CAGR for football valuations has outpaced other asset classes in the past 5, 10, 15 years. And so what are some of the things that private equity firms are doing to these clubs to improve their EBITDA and their value? So one is yield to fan ratio. So you hear this a lot from private equity firms where they're doing analysis that shows that, for example, Manchester United has done an analysis that shows that they earn 55 cents per fan, and they aim to double that. Chelsea did one, and it found that they earn $1 per fan that they have. They're going to look to double that. How are they going to double that? They're going to do stuff like starting to offer virtual ticket sales, things like that. One of the downsides is are the ticket prices going to go up? Yes, they are. Is the Guinness going to be double? Yes, it is. So they're also doing things like enhancing front office operations. This is a key one. What does that mean? Well, that means hiring and firing people. That's what that means. There's a lot of vague terms in private equity, and that means we're letting people go and bringing in people that are going to be largely performance driven. They're looking to get massive sponsorship deals, and they're going to look to buy low and sell high of players. An example of that, this is really wild. So Stan Collymore in 1995 was the highest transfer in the English EPL of all time to Liverpool for $12 million. Fast forward 10 years later, Real Madrid paid $120 million for Christian Bale, which, by the way, is like being dwarfed all the time by other players as well. It's interesting too, a guy named John Katz, who is actually a baseball guy out of Rhode Island. He owns a private equity firm. And there's a lot of folks, you mentioned Wrexham, there's a lot of guys that are buying really, really lower tier divisions from the English Football League, like Wrexham. Woking is one that he bought. And he basically said, guys, it's basically like real estate. You buy the smallest house on the nicest block, and you put a lot of value into it, and you sell it.
I was thinking too. I mean, if it were apples to apples, wouldn't you rather own a sports team than a string of low tier gas stations or something? Like that's as from sports fans, or even if you're not a sports fan, just the atmosphere, the fun, so to say, that comes with it. It's a no brainer for some of these guys, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mention that too, because I listened to a podcast on Wall Street Journal that private equity firms, one of their biggest things they're buying up right now are car washes. And they're buying them in droves and making gazillions of dollars on it, essentially by turning them into a subscription model. It's basically, that's what private equity will do, is they'll buy something and sometimes they'll make a ton of changes, or they might just make one simple tweak and turn it from a semi-profitable to a massively $1 million company. So the other thing I would say is there's different types of private equity funds, and there's different types of acquisitions. There's the full takeover, which is a little bit more straightforward, which is, a private equity firm buying the club outright and running it as they see fit. There's also this is where it gets a little trickier. There's the multi-club ownership model, which City Football Group is of Man City, they also own stake in 10 clubs. 777 Partners owns Genoa, Paris Red Star, Hertha Berlin, Melbourne Victory, Vasco da Gama, Sevilla, who just won the Europa League. You probably had no idea. So that's where it gets tricky, honestly, is conflicts of interest. So Redbird Capital as well owns AC Milan. They own a stake of that gets into Liverpool, which, by the way, they are rivals. They competed against one another in the 2005 Champions League. So that's tricky. So Redbird Capital, AC Milan, but they also own Toulouse. So in France. Now, Toulouse isn't really a regular Champions League, competitor. However, if they want to be, guess what? They're not going to be, because they don't ever want Toulouse to be better than AC Milan. So it's probably fine, but if you're a life Toulouse fan and you're hoping for them to be the Champions League, you're out of luck.
The hope is out, because that ceiling is only going to be so high because of the business perspective of it. It's conflict of interest. There's some blurred lines there, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, some clubs kind of have the model where we touched on earlier, where they buy clubs that are good at grooming young talent. Boca Juniors does this, River Plate does this. Dortmund has kind of become known for doing that. And Club Bruges, they put 32 million in for Jordan Sancho, Dembele, Patrick Aubameyang, and they've made 309 million off of it. So a lot of clubs do that. The other thing I would mention that it's not so much who the private equity firm that's buying you, it's who are their investors and what are their investment strategy. So some private equity firms are going to be a little bit more of a long-term play, maybe a fixed income alternative also, although there aren't many of those. But then there are some that are really aggressive that want very high returns. And I don't know how much people understand of that piece of it. If sometimes investors in private equity firms could be a teacher's pension fund of Pennsylvania, well, that's probably not going to be as aggressive as some group that's looking for a real estate alternative that can outpace that into the 15-20% returns. That's going to be a little bit trickier. I would also say it's worth noting that on researching a lot of this, American sports leagues have been very, very reticent about allowing private equity firms into their leagues. NBA just changed their tune on this a little bit. They're dipping their toe in the water, but it's a 20% max. And, one of the reasons why they've been so reticent on this is that, frankly, it's just a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So they like to have single owners, because if you're running a league, you need consensus. You need to kind of all be on the same page. But if every team has a different private equity firm that have different boards and different investors that have boards on their investment, you got a lot of different agendas going on. And you could be just basically locked up on trying to get big decisions made. And so it's just frankly a managerial nightmare. As the old saying goes, what's a camel but a horse drawn by committee? And so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, where, in the EPL and the La Liga and, Serie A, you're letting in a lot of private equity firms that have a lot of people involved and a lot of different thoughts on how they should be managed. And there's a lot of egos.
It's taking a sports team and probably breaking it down into line items. Mm-hmm. Players are line items, like expenses are line items. It's, everything's a business, and of course, and obviously that's a big part of it, but how far is too far?
Yes.
I guess is the question. Everyone wants to know.
That's exactly right. You're taking the people. I mean, you're a line item and you're an expense. You're either a profitable one or you're not. And they not only will they cut you, they have a fiduciary responsibility for their investors to cut you if they need to. Another really interesting component of this is what percentage of these private equity firms are American? The vast majority. 2021 Champions League final pitted Atletico Madrid against AC Milan. Well, that's a New York-based hedge fund versus a credit-based private equity firm out of Los Angeles. A lot of people probably don't know that. Also, I mentioned the English Football League, where Wrexham and Crawley Town and Walsall, Wrexham that we talked about, 20% of those teams now are owned by Americans. So, you know, I don't know how the Europeans feel about that. I mean, they certainly didn't like the Glazers taking, you know.
I have a hunch. They probably don't love it.
Yeah, I don't love it, and it's bringing a lot of capitalistic. There's a clash of cultures here. Is what we're underscoring. So like here are you. There's a lot of good stories, but here's a bad one. So ALK used a leveraged buyout to acquire Burnley, and what a leveraged buyout means is it used the club as collateral to secure a loan and basically take on a lot of debt. This is what happened in the book, The Barbarians at the Gate, which we'll detail a little bit more later. It's essentially the exact same thing, and it's very, very slippery slope. So what happened is that Burnley effectively mortgaged the club in order to complete its purchase, and there are certain incentives in their contract. Well, guess what? They're now $90 million in the hole to AL Capital. So they're $90 million worse than they were before the private equity acquisition. That's probably something they didn't really foresee. So, I mean, it's literally what happened to RGR Nabisco, essentially. They took on too much debt. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I'm sure they'll be fine, but that's not so much of a nice one. There's also a thing called Project Big Picture that is kind of being quarterbacked by Manchester United and Liverpool due to COVID making the lower half of the EPL essentially bankrupt. And what's happened there is that they're ceding significant decision making to the top 9 clubs in the EPL. And those are all the same, you know, the familiar players that we all know. And a lot of people are saying this could be the end of promotion and relegation.
Well, it makes me think of, it got shut down to be revisited later, like the Super League with Real and Barcelona, right?
It's exactly what it is.
We're the 12, we're the 15 teams that by far and away make the most money in the world. Let's just kind of get in a league together. So that's, obviously where some of that motivation to start something like that happened.
It's exactly what it is. They want to reduce the number of EPL games and increase the number of games playing against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. We all love that, but it's not so good for the Southamptons, the Evertons of the world. I mean, even though Everton's a little bit on the higher end, but still, I mean, Brighton, there's, it's not good for the little guys.
But then you think about it from, just playing devil's advocate, Luton Town coming into the Premier League next year, should their voting power be the same as Manchester United? I'd someone above my pay grade, right, can figure that out. But from the flip side, you see some of the reasoning behind it. But again, how much is too much from the fairness of the sport, the promotion, relegation? You can see all the lines are just getting crossed every which way.
Yeah. Well, the Project Big Picture would say they don't get as much of a say, and maybe that's right. But the Luton Town fans aren't going to love that too much. The last thing I would say is that private equity firms, they don't buy and hold; they buy and sell. The typical time horizon for a private equity firm is 5, 7, occasionally 9 years. That is a New York minute in the grand scheme of things with 150-year-old clubs. And they come in, they make changes quickly and sell it. So the thing is, not so much who's the private equity firm buying it, but who are they going to sell it to is another interesting piece. Another one is these things called SPACs, which is special purpose acquisition companies, often called blank check companies. Often doesn't translate to blank checks on the field. And those are the really aggressive private equity firms. And we talked about a lot of the bad, but let's talk about some of the good. I mean, you talked about Wrexham. Ipswich Town is a pension fund that has a longer time horizon. That's that Brett Johnson, a Rhode Island investor. They're a lot more patient. They're not meddling with day-to-day affairs as much. Angel City FC. They're a lot of these private equity firms are looking to women's clubs, which I think is wonderful, and giving them a capital injection that they need. And we all seen what incredible stuff Natalie Portman and Julie Foudy and Mia Hamm and the other brilliant hedge fund venture capitalists out in the California are doing with Angel City FC, the first full female-owned club. 20,000 season ticket holders, just incredible. So kind of, the key takeaway from this is that, these private equity firms, they come in to buy, make some changes, and they sell it. A lot of times that is, things are going to be more expensive for their fans. And if they have some, I guess I could say, like, if a private equity firm that owned Chelsea 10 or 15 years ago, they probably would have sold Lampard and Terry a lot sooner, and the fans wouldn't have necessarily loved that. So there's going to be some things that it's going to get weird, and this is far from over. It's just getting started, so everyone keep their eyes on that.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, money makes the world go round. It would be silly for us to not think that, but when does it take away from the watching experience?
Sure.
Because that's when it would turn, right? If, let's just say some, mega company just happened to just buy 6, 7, 8, 9 teams, and you have a couple of them doing that. Again, it's just how far is too far? When does it take away from what we love about it all, which is the, competitive watch?
Yeah. So. Well, and it hasn't yet, and I hope it doesn't, but I just think it's something we should keep an eye on. We talked about that time horizon. We're in like year 1, 2, 3, not 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So everyone just keep your eye on it. So we talked about the Barbarians. Now let's talk about the Sheiks. Sovereign wealth funds. What are sovereign wealth funds? Well, they're wealth funds that play a major political and economic role in the most of the Arabian Peninsulas, from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman. They're investment vehicles that pool revenue from the country's resource extraction, oil and gas. They're oil and gas money that are controlled by the government of the country. So, everyone kind of knows this, but like pretty much, Qatar owns Paris Saint-Germain. That's essentially what's going on here. It's, it's just tricky because these sovereign wealth funds are not subject to the transparency rules that are expected of other global investment vehicles. And they're very political. They're very politically driven. The Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund is headed by Mohammed bin Salman, and the most recent massive one is Newcastle. Newcastle is giving a consortium from Saudi Arabia, the Public Investment Fund.
Again, you're touching upon it. It's like the tip of the iceberg, right? It's like it's the year 1, 2, 3. I know, like you could say Man City and PSG, where a couple of years ago those were kind of the first dominoes, but it's even it's creeping everywhere, right? I think of like the Live Golf Tour.
Oh yeah.
Right. They just had a merger with the PGA. Essentially, Saudis own the golf.
Yep.
Just everywhere now, so you can see it not only with soccer. Again, the slippery slope. What's the 25 years? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's right. Despite arbitration and protests from fans, the deal went through. Man City, as we know, is controlled by the Emirati royal family, Sheikh Mansour of United Arab Emirates. He sits on various boards, including the International Petroleum Investment Company, the Abu Dhabi Investment Council. He likes to boast that he engineered the acquisition in 2008, basically with sums from the Abu Dhabi Investment Council. So those are a couple notable ones. We talked about Qatar and PSG, Messi, Neymar, Mbappe. And even literally yesterday, it's coming out that Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad of Qatar is making a bid for Manchester United. He's competing with a group called Ineos, which is, guess what? A private equity firm. And some other clubs that are tied to oil money that you may not know: Real Madrid, Arsenal, AC Milan, Benfica, Malaga, FC Zenit. Then
I was just gonna say, it's like the more you dig, the more it's like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. You know, everyone thinks PSG, Man City, you know, Newcastle, but the more the more you get into the back ends of things, it is everywhere.
Everywhere. It's every beloved club there. They're already there. And the fact that you maybe don't know it means they've achieved what they wanted. So there's a thing called soft power. And the best way to describe that would be there's a book by Catherine Belton called Putin's People, of which it's fairly seriously alleged that Putin basically armchair quarterbacked Abramovich buying Chelsea to essentially curry good favor with the British people. And, of course, that's denied, but we all know that's fairly likely. And, of course, he no longer owns Chelsea because of the war in Ukraine. There's another term called sports washing, and Newcastle is sort of tied to that most directly here lately. It's, it's an attempt to kind of have something more favorable in the news than some not so favorable things in their own country.
Well, I use this metaphor. It's like back in ancient Rome when the emperors, when the people were restless, what did they do? They threw big Olympics and they threw a big sport. It's the same thing, just on a 2023 flavor of it, if you will. It's
exactly that, and you took the words right out of my mouth. As a matter of fact, this is not new to the world. Benito Mussolini, we've talked about him before. He did that in the 1934 World Cup to promote fascism. The Nazi propagandized the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. Mobutu Sese Seko did it in Zaire for the Rumble in the Jungle. They did it in the Philippines with the Thrilla in Manila. So this is not new, but it's happening. The other big thing about the sovereign wealth funds and the oil money are shirt sponsorships. If you can't buy the club, you can buy the shirt. And, I could probably even turn around and see a few behind me. I don't know if there's any behind me, but there certainly will be. It provides a buffet of public-facing opportunities for enterprising oil monarchs. Arsenal, Man City, Real Madrid, PSG, Lyonnais, Barcelona even has been seen wearing these shirts, and so it's something that happens quite a bit. Roma as well, Bayern Munich, Schalke of Gazprom. Despite the shell companies and funds that own the club, the link to oil is inextricably linked. It's
almost harder to find a recognizable club that hasn't been injected with something like that than it is to find examples. They're like I said, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
It's almost harder to find the clubs that aren't.
And so this is what's really wild. So when you really, really, really dig deep on this, you can basically find out that Pep Guardiola is responsible for oil prices rising. So there was a Harvard International Review article that said if Pep Guardiola of Man City wants a player, he just puts a highlight reel together, he emails it to Sheikh Mansour, and then he gets the player. The funds are transferred. Then it's joked that he sends the funds. He says, "All right, Pep, you can have your player." Then Sheikh Mansour raises the price of oil the next day to recoup the expense.
No wonder he doesn't want to go anywhere.
That's right.
Why would he? Would he?
It's an endless amount of fun.
Yeah, and that's why I think they're going to do pretty well on. Let's see, when we're recording this, it'll be Saturday. It's the Champions League final.
Yeah,
so
right.
Why would he go?
Yeah, and by the way, Champions League, Man City, Sheikh Mansour, and then Inter Milan was acquired in large part by a private equity firm. So there you go, Barbarians for Sheiks right there. So, in conclusion, why did we call this episode Barbarians and Sheiks at the Gate? Well, it's a riff on the book Barbarians at the Gate, which is a play-by-play account of the leveraged buyout of RJR Nabisco, where the former CEO of Nabisco, RJR Nabisco, essentially tried to buy the company himself, leveraging, using the company as collateral and saddling it with tons of debt. In doing so, he awakened the Barbarians at the gate, which is KKR and First Boston. And it basically turned into an absolute bidding war, underscored with ego, hubris, and vindictiveness. Who do you think won? It was KKR. And in doing so, they saddled it with so much debt that RJR Nabisco no longer exists. And thousands upon thousands of people lost their jobs. So what I'm saying is that the Barbarians are no longer at the gate. They're in your house. They're in your den. They got their feet up on the coffee table. They're dipping their Oreos in your milk.
They're comfortable.
They're very comfortable. And not only that, there's not just Barbarians. There's Sheiks, and there's Chinese billionaires, and there's venture capitalists, all set against the quaint European landscape that is going to make for some very strange bedfellows. You know, it's very Thomas Friedman-esque in that the world is flat, and we talked about COVID accelerating a lot of different trends throughout the world. Well, the world just got real flat, and instead of a quaint party in your den, it's more like a WWF Royal Rumble style big business car crash of Chinese billionaires, American private equity firms, sovereign wealth funds, and who knows how long it is before the Silicon Valley companies get a hold of it, which, by the way, is rumored. You let those guys in too, it's going to be absolute bedlam.
It's the game behind the game.
That's right. So someone's going home with a bloody nose. Who will it be? Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, folks, we got two extremely special guests here. Two people I love more than anything in the world, including my wife. You want to say, hey, Mom? Hey, Mom. I got my sons, Jack and Henry, here, and we're going to do rapid fire with Jack and Henry Healy. Okay, you guys ready? Yeah. Okay. All right, just start. Messi or Ronaldo?
Ronaldo. Messi.
Ooh, we got a little battle going here.
Little brother rivalry over there.
Yeah. All right, Messi or Maradona?
Messi. Messi.
Okay, all right. Ronaldo or Ronaldo? So Cristiano or Il Fenomeno?
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Okay. Very good, very good. All right, Donovan or Dempsey?
I'm going to go with Dempsey.
Donovan.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Favorite player of all time?
Ronaldo.
Messi.
Oh, boy.
It's getting hot in here. Okay. Favorite center mid of all time?
Zidane.
Cruyff.
Oh, I like it. Good selections there, guys.
Henry with the Cruyff call. That's so clutch. But Zidane, oh, that's mine.
I have a question for you guys. Who is your favorite soccer show host?
That's rough, but I would say you.
I was going to be perfect. Yeah. What about you, Henry?
Dad.
Yeah.
All right. I guess Dad can drive you home now.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Two legends, rock star athletes, soccer, baseball, football, basketball, pickleball, every other sport there is. Jack and Henry Healy. Keep an eye on those guys, folks. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Like, comment, subscribe. Leave us some comments of what you want us to get into. Love to hear your opinion. Do you boys want to send us off?
What do you want to say? Okay. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Perfect. See you, everybody.